Hello, this is Robbie Mitchell here from Head in the Cloud Development to give you an updated walkthrough of our Maps for NetSuite BFN approved Suite app. This video is recorded in February 2025 using version 3.14.0 of the Suite app on NetSuite version 2025.1. So first off, if you're new to my channel, what is Maps for NetSuite? Put simply, the Suite app is a Google Maps integration for NetSuite. The purpose of the Suite app is to allow users to easily map groups of customers, transactions, or pretty much any other record on a standard Google map within the NetSuite interface. Users control what is shown on the map primarily by using predefined saved searches, but you can also specify filter criteria on the fly. And just a quick note on the version history here. Maps for NetSuite was previously known as Suite Maps, which has been around for over a decade now. If you're just now getting started with the Suite app, I recommend watching the previous Maps for NetSuite demo videos that I've published each February over the last 4 years, where we walk through many more of the features in detail. This video is meant to be an annual update where we go through some of the newer features. So here's what this video is going to cover. First, as usual, I'll start by showing you how easy it is to find and install the Suite app. Second, I'm going to show you how we've implemented address caching to speed up the geocoding process. Third, I'll show you how you can include hyperlinks with group transaction searches. Fourth, probably the biggest UI improvement of the year is that we now support marker clustering. Fifth, we're going to look at drawing polygons on the map and saving drawn shapes. Sixth, I'll show you how you can now base the brightness intensity in a heat map on a weighted value from the underlying records. Then I'm going to show you some enhancements we've made around distances and searches. And finally, we'll look at map portlets and see how we've simplified custom filter values so that multiple users can use the same portlet without trampling each other's filters. So without further delay, let's get into it and see Maps for NetSuite in action here in my demo account. Okay, so in case you want to follow along, let me first show you how to find the Suite app if you need to install it. If you just click on the Suite Apps tab in NetSuite and type in Maps, Maps for NetSuite should come right up. You just need to click this blue Install button. When you do, it should take about a minute to install. After you've installed it, you should have this new Maps tab on your NetSuite menu. You can use this to get to your map records. Let's get started with a new map. So the first feature update we're going to talk through today is coordinate caching. For our demonstration scenario, let's do a map of a grouped transaction search. So first, just to show you, this is what my search looks like, and if I save and run it, we see 39 results grouped by customer, counting the number of transactions, and summing the amount by item. So in other words, it's grouped by customer, address, and item at this point. So let's see what happens if I plug this search into a map. So before I type in the saved search, since it's a grouped search, I need to just set my marker configuration to my transactions grouped configuration. And I'll show you what this looks like in a minute. But let me first just plug in the search and show you what it looks like. Okay, here we go. And we can easily drill down by clicking on the results on the directory on the right. But now plug your ears for a minute if you're not technical. Let's circle back to what I mentioned about caching address data for a minute. If you've been using Maps for very long, you know that one challenge we've historically faced with group transaction searches is that we can't write back the geocoded latitude and longitude coordinates to the records since we don't actually have any reference to the individual transactions that make up these grouped results. This has meant that every time you run a group transaction search, if the transactions hadn't already been geocoded, you'd experience a delay while Google translated the textual address into latitude and longitude. Well, I'm happy to say that we finally have a solution in place for that. Basically, since the coordinates for any given address will never change, we're using NetSuite's caching module to store coordinates for each address geocoded. This means if you've looked up the coordinates for an address once, they'll then be available immediately, which gives a huge performance gain and much improved user experience. In other words, if I map these results the second time, they should come back pretty much instantly since we don't actually have to ask Google to geocode these transaction addresses again. Okay, and that's that. Now let's save this map and move on. As promised, let's take a look at the map marker configuration that I have here. In case you're curious, this is how I set it up to show this total sales, number of sales, and the customer and item from my group transaction search. And while we're here, let me show you how you can include a link to the transaction results, even when you're using grouped search results here. But let's talk about this first for just a second. Right now, my search is showing me orders summarized by customer, item, and amount. So if I want to see rolled up amounts like this, then breaking it down to the individual transaction level doesn't really make sense. In other words, with these results as they are, linking to the customer from the map makes sense, but linking to individual transactions does not, as multiple transactions make up each result. But on the other hand, if we have a group transaction search that we can summarize at the individual transaction level, then we can include a link to the transactions as well. And all we have to do is add a grouped internal ID column to our search. It should look like this. So if I save my search now, we'll now see that it breaks out every transaction individually, which means we can add a transaction hyperlink on our configuration now. And to help it make a little bit more sense, let's change this count on transaction number to a group column as well. Okay, that makes a bit more sense. So here now we're going to change our tran ID column to be a group, and we're going to mark it as a hyperlink. So I'm going to save this, and then if I edit my map and map the results again, we should now have a hyperlink to each individual transaction. And I should have updated the label for that, but I didn't. So there we go. The transaction drill down link works great. Okay, let's go back to the map marker configuration again and look at something else. What I really want to show you here is probably my favorite new feature, and this is the Enable Marker Clustering checkbox. If I enable this setting and remap my search, let me show you the difference. As you can see, we now have clusters of map markers, which is really handy if you're mapping more points than the humans that are looking at the map can grasp visually. And if you zoom in, they kind of automatically break out into individual points. It really helps with browser performance as well, since even on a new computer, they often seem to struggle a bit when there are hundreds of map markers on the screen. So if you're using Maps and you haven't already switched this feature on, I highly recommend you try it. After all, it's easy to switch clustering back off again if it isn't helpful on your map. Okay, let's move on. I'm going to go to a new map. Now let's say you want to do something like maybe map a certain sales rep's territory, but what if their territory is slightly difficult to define, like maybe just the top half of California here? Well, you've probably noticed these drawing buttons at the top of the map. The circle and square have been there for many years, but recently we've finally added another button here for drawing polygons. So with this, I can draw just about any shape on the map, like this. And then click Map Results, and it will show me whatever's in that shape. And guess what else? Now you can even save a map with its shape drawn on it, and the shape will save with the map data, whereas before it did not. Pretty cool, right? Okay, let's move on and talk about a new feature we've added to heat maps. For this scenario, let's say that maybe you want to see a heat map where larger sales show up as brighter heat blobs than smaller sales amounts do. Let me show you the search I've set up to demonstrate this. So to start with a very simple example, this is a search where we have 7 transactions spread across the US. And let me show you what a heat map looks like with this kind of as it is now. I'll select my heat map configuration and then type in my saved search. So currently when we do a heat map, it looks like this, which really isn't very interesting. However, the new feature we've added is the ability to do field-based heat intensity. So the larger sales should show up brighter than the smaller ones. Let's look at the search results again and I'll explain more. Now this data set is too small to generate a big, full, impressive heat map, but it is just large enough to clearly demonstrate the new feature here. Let me show you what I mean. The sales amounts on these orders range from very small to a max of about 10,000. And you might have orders in this range in real life. So if we want to have the larger sales make more heat on the heat map, we now have a way to do that. If we edit our heat map configuration, we now have this field-based heat intensity field here. If I put amount in here and save the configuration, what we're hoping to see is that the Florida order should show up much brighter than, say, the Rhode Island or California or Oregon orders. And maybe the one in Washington might be kind of a medium brightness. So let's refresh this and see what happens. And yeah, when we map it, we do see that the one in Florida is by far the brightest dot, whereas the one in Washington state and kind of in the middle of the country are medium brightness. And the other 3 we can just barely see. The ones in California and Oregon you can kind of make out, while I can't really even see the one in Rhode Island at all. So yeah, if heat maps are helpful to you, then go forth and have fun with this new feature. Alright, next let's talk about distance filtering. Now we've always had the ability to map things based on a distance to either another customer, a certain zip code, or wherever you are in the world. To see what I mean, let's see customers that are 25 miles from the zip code 95014. So that's what we have, and now what you can do is export this to a saved search, and it'll properly include a distance filter that you can then use for further filtering however you want. So let me give my saved search a name, distance from 95014. Yes, I want to view my search. Pop-up was blocked. Okay, and if I edit my search, we'll see my distance filter. But one thing I really like to do is take this search filter and plug it in as a search column so that I can see the distance in the search results, like this. It's going to be a formula numeric. Just going to paste in the formula there, and let's give it a label. Call it distance from Cupertino. And let's remove some of these columns that we don't really want to see. We'll do save and run. Okay, but can we round this? Let's find out. Let's say round to tenths. Oh, much better. And guess what? From here, you can go back to your map and set it to show this distance column in the map marker info pop-up. So let me edit my configuration. To customer search, we're going to add a formula numeric. We'll call it distance from Cupertino, and I'll save this. Now if I just go to a new map and plug in my search, if I click on any of these, we should see the distance. So that works great. Now let's talk about map portlets. There are a couple of things I want to show you here. We often get asked if an administrator can create one map portlet, deploy it to a bunch of users, like maybe different sales reps, and have it show them only their customers. Well, you could do this kind of thing before by restricting search results, but we've made a big upgrade here. Let me walk you through it. So first off, before we deploy a map portlet, we have to have a map record to show on the portlet. So let's do that quickly. Let's keep it simple and say we want to see all customers within 20 miles of this zip code. Do 97223. Let's just see what it looks like. Okay, we get 24 results. Let's give it a name so we can save it. We'll call it Portland Area Customers. And now we've added this Create Portlet button, which you can use if you have permission for Suite scripts. It basically just opens up a new script deployment for this map. I'm going to deploy it for all roles. Go ahead and release it. Check that the map is set correctly as the parameter. Okay, so my portlet is deployed. Let's add it to my dashboard now. Just have to click Custom Portlet. When the portlet appears, we can click Setup. I'm going to use my Portland Area Customers map. So this is how our portlet looks initially. Let's go back to the deployment, and I'm going to show you how to add the filter for the zip code. So to find all our deployments, we'll go to Customization, Scripting, Scripts. If we filter this to Portlet Scripts API 2.1, we should see our maps portlet. Here's all my deployments. I'm going to show you how to add the zip code filter here. So we'll use this filter fields config field here to specify our filters. I'm just going to add one for the zip code field. And setting this up isn't a new feature, of course, but what is new is how the values for the filters are handled. We used to try to store them in this parameter here, but we're not doing that anymore. Let me show you what we do now. So if I, as the portlet user, want to change the portlet to be based on my zip code, I can now use this zip code filter here. And when I do, the map immediately updates. What's new here is how this is handled on the back end. I'll show you very briefly. So as I mentioned, previously the values would have been saved directly under the portlet deployment, meaning that there could only ever be one value saved. But now we've introduced a new map portlet filter value custom record to manage these. You won't normally need to interact with these, but if you want to see them, here it is, map portlet filter value. They're basically records per deployment, per user, per filter that store the value. So now any number of users can use their own specific filter values with each portlet. Doing it with custom records instead also makes the permissions setup simpler, as users no longer need to have edit access to script deployments like they did before.
And that concludes the 2025 tour of the latest updates of Maps for NetSuite. At Head in the Cloud Development, we never stop developing, and we always strive to make our products better, more complete, and easier to use. If there are any features you'd like to see, please let us know and we can consider them. Otherwise, get in touch with us if you have any comments or questions. You can reach out by clicking the Contact Partner button on our profile on suiteapp.com. Thank you for watching. We'll see you at SuiteWorld.